Eric, when you brought this to me, the first thing I thought about was, I finally get to, make war scenes. You know what I mean? And I know what they sound like. I know the sound of rounds whizzing by your head, but specifically from the historical side of musket balls. Growing up, my folks took us to Gettysburg and Antietam, Williamsburg. So we grew up in that type of environment, and I've always wanted, and I told you this earlier on, one of my dreams was to be a part of a historical production.
You are listening to Historyman, the platform for historians, curators, and authors to tell their stories of the American Revolution, walk in the footsteps of heroes, and proclaim freedom reigns. On today's episode, we are with Scott Halford of Foursite Studios and Joseph Goldsmith of Persimmon Lane Studios, and we're talking about the Historyman Comics graphic novel animation project. This series is featured on the South Carolina 250th YouTube channel, and you can find a link on our website, historymanpodcast.com. So welcome, Joseph and Scott. Appreciate y'all being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
I feel very fortunate to have met y'all. We started our graphic novel series just kind of a way to introduce the young children who would come to the museums and the important places, these battlefields and that sort of thing. And they go into these gift shops and they just didn't have anything for the kids. They had great big books for historians that spent years writing, and the adults would walk away with these great big volumes, sometimes 4 inches thick. And all the kids would walk away with was a trinket, and there was nothing really of substance for them to walk away with. And Historyman kind of expanded our podcast, which was kind of geared to adults, and just kind of reconstituted the graphic novels, the comic books for the kids, and gave them a window of learning for these great historical places we have in South Carolina. And then we have expanded even further and contacted Foursite Studios and Persimmon Lane Studios and turned this into especially the first series of The Rise of Thomas Sumter, into a quasi-animation for the kids. And the 250th has been a generous supporter of this and has put it up on their website as part of the lead up to the 250th celebrations this year. But just for you two, tell our listeners how they could find your work, and you specifically. Joseph?
Honestly, the easiest way to find me is just to Google or any web browser that you use, just Joseph Goldsmith Media or Joseph Goldsmith Music, because there's a couple Persimmon Lanes out there in other industries. So just Google my name. Just so Joseph Goldsmith Music or Media, either one of those, and you'll find me.
How about you, Scott?
The best way to find me is on Vimeo. So if you go to vimeo.com/Foursite Studios, and that's spelled Foursite. So Foursite Studios on Vimeo.
So how did you two meet? Y'all were kind of a team here. How did y'all first meet and collaborate together?
Well, Scott used to live here in Myrtle Beach, and we randomly met on one of the Facebook groups, like the film Facebook groups here. And then I actually called him because I couldn't remember the exact restaurant. We said it was either sushi or Mexican, right?
I think it was sushi. I think we met for sushi.
For the very first time. And it was one of those hey, you seem like somebody that I should probably know. You know what I mean? And so we met up, and we were there for, probably about 2 hours, just talking, getting to know each other and shooting the breeze. And how long was it after that before I contacted you about that first job with the university?
I think we knew each other for almost a year before we actually worked together.
Yeah.
So we just had in common the fact that we were both kind of these kind of scrappy filmmaker types, and you were into sound and composition, and I was into post-production and animation. So it was just we had to wait till the right project came along for us to get to work together.
And of course, that first project was a monster. But we we nailed it. And then that would kind of like set it in. It's just, we've kind of over the years just tossed stuff back and forth.
Yeah.
So what drives you to do your work? You got other people that do it 9 to 5 or whatever, and the kind of work that y'all do is really it's more of entrepreneurial in many respects. I would imagine, I don't know too much of, I don't want to get too far into the weeds here, but I would imagine it's feast and famine for what you do for being creators. So what drives you, if it's not the steady paycheck, what drives you is to do your work?
For me, I got a camera. I should say I was told not to put a camera in my hands when I was 8. My dad was borrowing a camera from a neighbor to videotape some family party, and I just wanted to touch this camera so bad, and he wouldn't let me because he was like, it wasn't like if, it's when you break this camera, I can't afford to replace it, so don't touch the camera. And ever since then, I've been obsessed with them. So I just love cameras. I've always known I wanted to make videos and movies, and me and my friends ran around when we were teenagers making films. And then I built my first computer and bought a camera when I was 21, and then just ran around everywhere I knew that I could find someone else who was making movies to collaborate with. Told people I could make anything from wedding videos to dance concert videos to try and make money and just pretend I knew how to do it until I figured it out. And then I guess what drives me now is I get to do something different every day. I get to work with really cool people. And it's interesting because I work with a lot of people who have very different views from me. But at the end of the day, in this industry, what matters is what sort of work you produce and what kind of person you are to hang out with. So if you're cool and you do cool work, that's really what matters to me. And being able to step back and look at something finally after you've been slogging for months on it and see it finished is pretty satisfying. And every once in a while you get an ego stroke from someone telling you did a good job. So
how about you, Justin?
And literally the same thing. It's the variables. I did the 8 to 4. For a long time. I was an educator for 12 years, and while the content that I directed, I was a choir director, but I also taught like multimedia, ethnomusicology, did musicals after school, choir competitions, etc. It was still the same drive, the same classroom, the same hallway, you know what I mean? And I thrive in a little bit more of a chaotic environment. So, and it was great, it just got to the point to where I needed a big change. And I had been, throughout those 12 years, I would have opportunities in music, film, on this side of the industry off and on professionally. So I always had that, and like for a while I owned a record label for a number of years that did very well, so I got a little taste of that, some radio. I got to dabble with some early Netflix House of Cards in season 1 as an actor, like just an extra, but that really exposed me to that side. And then I was an account executive on the side with a film company for a while, and all of that just kept snowballing and snowballing and snowballing. And then once the Guard, the State Guard here in South Carolina found out, like, this is part of my background, that's when they, pushed for me to utilize camera. So that gave me a lot more. And I'd never thought I'd be a camera operator. It was like I built my computer specifically for audio, and now I own, a small production facility, with all kinds of cameras and booths and lighting and all kinds of craziness. But I like it because it's that craziness, it's that variable, I like having multiple projects happening at the same time. So when I was cutting my teeth, in the Guard with Cam Op, I said, I think I could do this full time, So I jumped into audio. I had a really great opportunity, and for location sound, the guys running around with the boom, poles. And so I invested in my first audio kit which at the time I thought it was just like Scott with the camera. It's like, don't break this, because we can't afford to replace it. That's how I felt with this small little kit. And I really, really got bit by the bug. And now I have so many kits, and I look back and it's so small and cute now, compared to what I have. But I become complacent when I have the same thing, and whereas in an entrepreneurial mentality, you got to work at it. I mean, I'm from farm country. If you didn't wake up in the morning and feed the cows, and do your chores, there's a good chance you're not going to eat. So yeah, that 9 to 5 was just complacent. So like Scott, I like the variable. I like the that slight chaos. It's the whole, I don't really want to starve, so I'm going to go work. Or when we're having a feast time, it's, I don't want to work for the next 3 weeks, so let's go on a vacation. And it's having the freedom, the opportunity to do that.
But what are some interesting aspects of the Historyman Comics project that y'all have taken away? Personally,
getting exposed to stories that I otherwise probably wouldn't have really known much about without being a part of this project. In fact, that's kind of one of the most interesting things of my career is I know a lot of information about things that I wouldn't otherwise unless I'd been a part of the project. So I was able to develop some new skills for this project, even so, always developing new skills and getting to know you guys a little bit better. And that's probably the main thing for me, is just learning a few new things along the way.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. The scope of this production with Historyman. We've all been in those situations, but on a much smaller scale. This was a large project, so it forced us out of comfort zones. And I liked that, and there was a lot of skill acquisition that came with that. Well, not skill acquisition, skill enhancement. But I think the way that I would interpret that for me personally is just that, like with Historyman Comics, this production was up against, historical narratives that Hollywood has put out. You look at like The Patriot, Saving Private Ryan, Gettysburg, they're millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars, behind these productions, and it's great, because it's captivated millions of people, over the last, however many decades that Hollywood's been putting these out. While then we have, I don't want to say a captive audience, but an audience there that Hollywood has laid the groundwork for. The niche that we're in with this Historyman Comics production. It's a good opportunity because we're telling these historical narratives without needing to Hollywoodify the production and the story, and we can tell it based on the actual story and not kind of blurring the line that Hollywood is known to do, for the sake of profits and having an interesting story. I mean, you look at The Perfect Storm, like, I have friends that remember when that actually happened, and they're like, yeah, that movie, that's not what happened. You know what I mean? But it was a cool movie to watch. I enjoyed it, and based on a true story. Well, I feel like with us, we are telling the true story. It's not based on the true story. The objective was to tell the story, and that was my interesting aspect. My takeaway from this is being a good steward of the truth.
So each of you had specific roles in this project. One of the especially challenging roles was the voiceover talent. Tell our listeners, Joseph, you handled most of that. Tell our listeners how you worked through those challenges.
The time zones were the killer. That was the big thing, because we were, we had talent that, were in Ireland, Scotland, England, a couple that were in some other European countries. Mostly, though, thankfully, South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, and then a couple smattered, depending on if they were here, traveling here. We did have one individual that was traveling from production to production, you know what I mean, and would hop on a quick call to do a table read with us for a rehearsal. So that was challenging. But again, I like a good challenge. I like looking at, again, the variables. I like looking at the variables and saying, okay, these individuals are well versed in what they do in their craft of being a voiceover artist. And these three individuals are kind of new to the profession, but there's that raw talent, that hunger that they want it, and they give everything that they can at it. And that was fantastic. We did have one individual audition that is very well known, and we actually turned this individual down because when you're hearing it, you could tell that their heart wasn't in it, and it was just a paycheck for them. And it was one of those, nah, I'd rather have this individual that's potentially a diamond in the rough, that we had very long, I mean, some of these individuals, I had very, very, very long conversations with multiple times over the phone, over Zoom, doing some coaching sessions, because I taught vocal pedagogy for a long time. So think like a voice lesson or a speech lesson. So we were talking about character development and what this individual was like, what they could have sounded like. And it was great because we had a few people in the cast that are experts, in linguistics and things like that. So we had so many resources to bring in. It was just this really perfect amalgamation of historical characters and talent that we had. And like I said, the biggest challenge was just getting everybody together at the same time. But we made it work. And honestly, I think we could do it again in the same fashion that we did, and it would be another successful project.
I want to give a plug in to the Catawba Nation, sending one of their members of their tribe to our production, Black Bear. That's Philip Plyler. He did a great job for the Catawba Nation, representing them within that. You also are kind of tied in with, or you have a library of background noises that you use, and you produce your own music. Tell us a little bit about that and what you brought to the table in that project.
So before I built the production facility, and now camera and audio are kind of 50-50 in my workflow. Before all that, it was predominantly audio. Composer, Foley, which is the creation of the sound effects that we hear in movies. I've been enamored with that whole side of the industry since I was a teenager. I've always liked making sounds and understanding the genesis of sounds and how to create new soundscapes. So when you brought this to me, the first thing I thought about was, I finally get to, make war scenes, you know what I mean? And I know what they sound like, I know the sound of rounds whizzing by your head, but specifically from the historical side of musket balls. Growing up, my folks took us to Gettysburg and Antietam, Williamsburg. So we grew up in that type of environment, and I've always wanted, and I told you this earlier on, one of my dreams was to be a part of a historical production. And I'm a reenactor, as a hobby, so I love it. And so I dove into my library, and some stuff that I had curated myself, being on different sites with recorders, and others. I'm very fortunate to be tied in with Epic Stock Media and Sound Yeti out of Nashville. And they're a great company. I love them. I love their products. So I support them with products whenever they need. And then I was able to pull creaking door sounds, because sometimes we're in a hurry and I don't have time to get my kit and go find a creaky door, wait for everything to be quiet, and I just need to type in a keyword, and then pull up my library, and then creaky door sounds, and then I listen to each one of those creaky door sounds until the movement makes sense in the scene, etc., so on and so forth. So having that library pool at my disposal, as well as there was a couple spots where people are walking and I needed certain sounds, and this is where the Foley comes in, and it didn't exist. So I'd grab a mic, and at one point I was actually standing right here, and I went like this with the microphone, and I'm walking, capturing my feet, and I'm grabbing different things to walk on, which now I have the studio to do that in. But at the time, that is that organic process that really captivates my mind. brings these to life.
I feel like I remember you going out and recording horses running or horses trotting
Yeah,
or
yep. So
horses
I, yep,
walking, and all of
yeah,
them
I
had
did.
different sounds, and
Yep.
different horses have different gaits, and so
Yes.
and you were trying to record all of those and put them
Hmm.
into the project itself,
Oh
and I
yeah,
always
they're
thought
all
that
in
was,
there.
yeah.
Yep.
So how, Scott, this is probably for you, but how has AI changed your industry, and did you use AI on this project?
Um, the, the the short answer is no. I did not use any AI on this project whatsoever.
My man.
And the big answer is it's completely changing my industry right now. I am at the point where, I mean, I just bought a computer that's going to be dedicated to learning AI tools because if I don't learn them, then I'm going to be replaced by someone who doesn't have nearly the creative chops or the experience that I do, who will replace me because they know the AI tools. We're already at the point with AI where we could have just fed these images into an AI model and worked with an AI video generator to just fully animate these.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, it would have
uh,
been janky, but it could have done it.
yeah,
And
I
I
mean,
think
we
it's
could have
important
done
that
it.
we say that because Scott, you and I both know that while it can do the job, it still has its moments.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that it. I mean, it would have changed the animation style for sure, but I don't know that it would have saved us much time because of how much time
Right.
it takes to really get the AI to do what you want it
Right.
to do.
Right.
Um, but that being said, I mean, it's something that it's a wave that's coming. So we either need to ride the wave or get crashed by it. So
Right.
that's kind of where we're at with it.
So this is, I guess, for both of you. What have you learned about history while working on this project?
I guess one thing that I've remarked on is how much action these guys saw
Yeah.
and lived through is kind of amazing.
Yeah, like we again we've all seen the movies and and we know the stories, but when you have to study it to put a production together. I mean, you have to truly live these stories to because we have to be good stewards of history of our American history, and if we don't truly immerse ourselves in it, we will lose something. And yeah, I mean, Scott nailed it right there. Like they were in it. For example, like I know for a fact that when I'm out in the field, I have my time frame that I'm in the field, and then when that time is over, I'm going back to the barracks or wherever I happen to be at the time, right? Not these guys. You know, they were out there and they were in it the whole time. I mean, just the amount of grit that they had to endure, and especially when you look at guys like Sumter that were they had their moments, and it's very well displayed, I think, in these comics and in this production, where we would see Sumter kind of like come back into himself, and Jonathan did a fantastic job portraying Sumter. Kind of coming into that, but then he'd rally himself, or his consortium around him, of all of his colonels would rally him, and then boom, that energy was back, and and then which would just inspire the men around him, and then that inspiration would continue and continue. I mean, look at the way that it all ended. It was very up, and it just gave me chills thinking about it. We can still fight on and ever upward.
It's like the contrast between history and the movies is that at some point in the movies the story's got to end because the credits need to roll, but like these guys still had the rest of their lives to live. you know uh, I can't say that I know exactly what these guys were going through because like I live a very comfortable life, but I do understand the feeling of what I would go through if my children were threatened and I had to do whatever I had to do to keep them safe. I don't think I would hesitate to jump in. And you hear stories of war, and we're hearing one side of this, but the men are on the other side were inspired to do the same thing. So even though we don't feel like we don't have the same ideals, we're I mean the experience is pretty universal. Like we all feel like we're protecting our families.
And to that point, both of you are fathers. Would this project be something that you'd let your children watch?
My
Yeah.
children did watch it, and I think they were kind of surprised by it. They're like, "Dad, what are you?" He didn't even know I was working on it.
Yep. And same thing with mine. I mean, we watched it, and thankfully, I mean, our couple of them. I mean, my son got to be a part of it. Scott, was it your daughter?
Yeah, my daughter helped me
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of prep some of the graphics on a couple of the pages. We had to draw
Hmm.
some of the images in behind the speech bubbles, and
Yep.
I said, "Hey, do you think you could do this on your iPad?" And she said, "Oh yeah, totally." So she did it. It was
A
fun
digital
to work with
native
her.
right there. And that was the thing,
Yeah,
with Sumter's son, and in some of the kids' roles, I had Braden in the booth, because at that point I had the booth built, so doing that, and then, or if there were kids, I'd have my son and daughter come in here. Hey, I need you to say this one word here. All right, now back up 10 feet, say it again. Okay, now whisper. I mean, just to add that. So yeah, no, they were very aware of it, and I think I like the fact that while we do display and showcase the fact that it is war, it's not gory. And I think that that's the part that, and I'm saying this as both a father and a former educator, I would have no problem showing this to students, in a middle school, you know, and definitely to high school. But to my children, it's, yeah, I mean, there's a few moments of peril, but I think for the most part, it was very tastefully done to showcase to children and young adults the realities of war without it, doing doing damage to their psyche.
yeah, without shock and awe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the project is The Rise of Thomas Sumter. It's a graphic novel animation project from Historyman Comics. You can find it on the South Carolina 250 YouTube channel, or you can find a link on our webpage, historymanpodcast.com. And I'd encourage everyone to go to that and watch it. It's a pretty cool historical review of one of our heroes here in South Carolina, Thomas Sumter. So thank y'all so much for coming on board, and we look forward to working with you again here soon.
Thank you very much.